So for texture sources, I do often use ambient CG is great. There are a ton of materials here. I do, yeah, there's Polygon as well, which isn't bad. You do get, you can create a free account and have access to quite a few, again, like images, textures, that kind of thing. Another great one is Megascan. So you probably already have an Unreal account, and if you log in to Megascans with Unreal, you get full unlimited access to the sort of collection of stuff. So there are things like, let's say, surfaces, right? So if you're looking for, let's say, kind of like a cinder block or concrete wall, um, I'll sort of show you how I use these just kind of briefly. Okay, I'll go to download 8K res. I usually go as max res as I can. So if there's even 12K, sometimes I'll go with it, because it's easy to kind of take a high res, high detailed image and scale it down, but you can't really take a low quality image and make it more, make it higher quality. So I'll just talk a little bit about kind of how we deal with some of these things here. I'm going to just split this, split hidden. So I'll just go to solo. I like to just kind of go into solo mode, usually to kind of focus in on a certain area. I mentioned there's sort of two ways to manage your mesh for sculpting. One method is to Dynamesh, but Dynamesh is not working on mesh like this. So technically this is a plane and it has no thickness. So it's like an open mesh. There's an open border on the outer edges here. So if I Dynamesh this, it could crash. It could make weird, it's kind of closing the back and then potentially sealing it to the front. And I'll just smooth this out a little bit and try to Dynamesh again. If I try to Dynamesh again, it'll get splotchy. If I try to sculpt and do something else, I might get holes in the mesh like this. So I don't recommend Dynamesh for something flat like this, okay? It's fine if you've got like a solid object with an actual shape of volume, but something flat, not great. So in this case, I tend to handle things a little bit differently. Let's see, I'll go to my downloads for a second. Let's extract that while I'm waiting. Let's go back. So I like to just use ZRemesh in this case. So I'll say ZRemesh, and it will give me nice, even distribution of polys, okay? So that's great. And I have this tool called XMD. I believe it's installed on all your machines as well. So I'll show you just some kind of classic ways of using textures. So let's say I have a brick wall texture that I want to use. You'll see some issues with this. So if I double click this, XMD is great because it's kind of tied into ZBrush as a separate program. Oops, that's a pretty intense. I'll divide the mesh up a little bit as well so it can kind of support the detail. So you literally try to kind of like brush this on, but you'll see a problem right away, right? This thing kind of doesn't tile very well. It can have bad overlap. It's hard to make that very, very clean. Okay. Same thing too. You might have just a drag style material. And again, it's not always great at allowing you to get this sort of same consistent depth. I mentioned in the outline 2 scale, right? Like these bricks compared to this character mesh are massive. So you want to make sure the scale is appropriate to the scene, okay, of the texture you put on. So those are a couple ways brush wise that you can work with this. Another way is to basically apply this. There's a little system I'll show you called surface noise. Surface and then noise. So if you turn this on, there's something called the plugin scale. And it's basically like a mathematically generated noise texture. Okay. And you can affect this by scaling noise up, down. You can increase or decrease the strength. I'll just say okay. And right now it's in preview. It's technically not applied to the surface, so I have to hit apply to mesh. And there it is on the surface. Okay, so that's not bad. It's okay. But I'll show you a great way to use this. So one way is to go into noise, edit, and it might be hard to see. Let me zoom out so you can see this. Again, it's kind of weird. It's like interfaces within interfaces in ZBrush. But if you click on this alpha, I'll go to my downloads and grab, let's say, that concrete. I usually go with the displacement texture. And again, there's kind of an alpha scale as well. So if I scale it down, I'm going to crank the strength up. Alpha scale. And what you're getting is a mix between noise. So that's pure noise, and then this is the alpha. So I usually go pure alpha, increase the alpha scale, and you see it tiles really nicely, right? Super sweet. So if I hit OK, apply to mesh, there it is. Pretty nice. So one thing I'll do as well, sometimes you can sort of see the texture's a bit skewed, and that's because if I go to edit right now, it's actually doing what's called a projection, meaning it's sort of looking at this mesh from whatever angle I opened it at and is like throwing it on straight from that view. So I find a lot of times I will need to create UVs for this. This is where Go Z is really, really great. So if I hit Go Z, I'll just make sure maybe my other Maya scene is closed because I don't want to necessarily tweak this one again. But let's say I hit Go Z, this will launch Maya. It'll send this only this specific tool. And that's also interesting too, because you can also say send all tools, send visible. Okay, so you have options there. This line is just for Go Z. Right here. There, so Go Z. Okay, so it always takes a little bit of time for this to open, even if it's a light mesh. It's kind of getting Maya open here. Again, the scale might be a little bit weird, but let's see. Oh, crashed. Try it again. It should work okay. So I'm in. You might notice this. This object is maybe really, really large for ZBrush. So what you can do is actually go to your camera under Attribute Editor and just crank up what's called the far clipping plane. And now you should be able to see. So anything on a huge scale, you have to, the camera's kind of designed by default to sort of like not show things beyond a certain scale. So anything beyond, I think it was 10,000 or 100,000 centimeters, it won't show. So that's a good way to kind of get this back into a usable area. But you can just go in here to UV Editor and you'll see probably there's no UVs. So I'm just going to go to UV Planar. And it's actually facing the right way. That's good. So if I go to UV Editor, you see it's filling the area. So I do want it to be non-proportionally scaled. So I'm going to shift right click, go to Unfold. Hit apply, and then yeah, I might just do a quick layout. We'll see if this works. You can also tell it to lay out along the U. Oops, let's go to shell. And there's another little trick that I use for this. So I'm going to take this and then go to oh, where is it? Align. Transform. Yeah, I'm trying to remember which way I did this, but yeah, I can also just rotate it. So basically we'll line up with the texture, right? So we want it kind of nice and square. So the nice thing about doing something like this is that we can just take this and go Z back. It'll go Z back. So that's actually updated. It might not be easy to tell, but then if I go back to noise, let me just double check. Is that, let's see, is that actually up to date? Oh yeah, it's still a bit askew, so I just want to try to fix it if I can. There, okay. I think that's a bit better. Let's take that, go Z back. It's a little bit better. By the way, too, if you ever want to edit the original mesh, you can go to under UV Master. Usually I'll do work on clone, so it kind of saves, it makes a separate tool, which is over here. So you'll see, what am I on? I guess it's this one, or no, CL is the clone. And under Z plugin, you can say, I want to work on a flat copy. So if I go to flatten, then you can sort of see it here. So if you need to kind of like rotate the whole shell, you can do that as well. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll unflatten, copy UVs. Is this back? Yeah, this is back in my scene here. So I'll do that. Go back into Z plugin and paste UVs. Paste UVs. Sorry, oh, I realized what I wasn't changing. UV. So if I turn this to UV, there we go. That's better. Sorry, totally screwing that up, but that's okay. Take the alpha scale down, hit OK. Again, kind of hard to see, so let me go back to edit. I'm going to scale this back up a little bit. Okay. Now you can hit apply to mesh, but you see the effect is going to be very minimal or not super strong. And I do have divisions on here, so I want to make sure this is usually up around like 4 million plus polys. If you find that when you do apply to mesh, it's not very strong, you can also say mask by noise. So what that will do is kind of leave the area masked, and then if you simply grab a move brush and make sure it's realigned to your world here, and then pull forward or backwards, depending on which way makes the most sense. Now you've got that brick texture in the environment, right? So yeah, you can, before exporting maybe your layout, if you plan on actually using those things to truly you know, use them as your floor, your wall, blah, 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 you can kind of get that texture done earlier or UV it, but of course you can go Z at any time. Now, one thing that happens, right, is that the texture is repeating. It's kind of off in some ways. This is where the regular noise, meaning the non-alpha based noise, is useful. So you go to noise, hit edit. You can leave it on UV, which is great. I'll turn off the alpha, and there's our noise scale, and you can scale it down. You can adjust. I usually, like to go more subtle. And what's kind of fun, I'll show you some cool options here, is you can play with the curves. So it looks like maybe there's degradation in very specific pockets, like so. Okay. And then again, I'll play with scale, maybe have kind of like larger patches this way. Again, I'll usually go back into edit and dial the strength down. So sometimes like less is more, right? Having a little more subtlety is maybe better. And then apply to mesh. Okay. So again, it can just help break up the monotony, and so can, this is when we want to maybe get into like damage brushes or textures. Like I might even just look for maybe just sort of like rocky surfaces or, yeah, this looks kind of interesting. So if I drag this out, so let me switch to maybe a less glaring texture. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. I'll make a larger brush size so I can see it. I don't necessarily like that it's sort of like a big stroke brush. I kind of usually like these as inserts. So I'll show you this. So let's say we go to a drag insert, right? So that's kind of cool. So you can maybe have like, again, you want to watch out on the scale. So sometimes I'll just drop the intensity if I want to just vary the surface up a bit more, just so it's a bit more uneven and less textured. Sorry, not less textured. Breaking up repetition is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I'll grab maybe some of these. Let's see. Ooh, not so good. So yeah, sometimes it's a little bit of experimentation. There's also damage sets in here. So that can be kind of fun too. Let's grab something like this, right? You can kind of put these in it, and it's sort of interesting too, because at the right intensity, I do find like, sometimes you want the scale to be right, the intensity too. Making it more subtle, making it smaller or larger can kind of really allow you versatility in terms of how to use and mix it, right? I think at a certain scale it doesn't work. So that's something I mention a lot in the outline is, watch your intensity, make sure it sort of feels believable. I'm going to also, by the way, under draw, we can just change our camera to similar to our Maya camera. Yeah, for some reason, it doesn't always change. I notice it's very strange, but so let's go to transparency maybe. Yeah, solo is useful. So again, really kind of interesting way to sculpt. I mentioned before, yeah, if you're going to dynamesh something, so let's say I get out a solo to do this kind of wall over here. Let me just solo this. So this is a similar issue where it's sort of hard to manage, hard to deal with as is. So you can just dynamesh this. And dynamesh is great because it kind of can screw up the model a bit. So if I turn the resolution really, really low and dynamesh, yeah, maybe because of the scale of this thing, it's not going to dynamesh well, but sorry, let me undo a bit. Drop the res, dynamesh, there. So you see here, it's kind of like made it blocky, uneven, kind of really crappy. That can be useful in terms of just sculpting and doing a very basic form. So if this is going to be more like stone, a lot of times I'll use trim dynamic. And if you take a look at this, this is a very kind of common technique where, yeah, we'll use this lazy. I'm turning on lazy mouse, turning off lazy smooth radius, and turning up a little bit of lazy step. So now if you kind of go back and forth on a harder edge, it'll kind of make it look chipped and damaged, right? But again, I'm going to show you one other kind of quick technique for this. So I like to also Z remesh this kind of thing. So I'll just say Z remesh. And you see it doesn't kind of Z remesh well. It can kind of do weird things to the corners. So a lot of times I have to kind of help this along. So in my modeling toolkit, you can say group by normals. So what that means is that the normals are kind of like where the polygons are facing. And whenever the polygons change in major angles, so like right angles, like this change in the door frame here, the inner door frame, if I go group by normals, it will automatically group them differently. And what that does is allows me to go to keep groups, turn off smoothing, and Z remesh, and now it keeps a nice grid shape for this whole thing. So now all I need to do is divide a few times, right? And again, I can kind of do my damage on the door frame here. Let's say if I wanted to, right? Just kind of going back and forth, chipping away at it. And you see this a lot in games, right? Stylized work, you'll see this kind of thing. So again, the great thing is, I believe, did I lose my UVs? I might have actually. Let me undo a bit. I always forget about this. I should do it after a Z remesh, is just quickly go in and do UVs. So yeah, Z plugin, just turn on polygroups, unwrap, bam, done. You want to fix it, go Z to Maya. So it's a lot of rinse repeat, you know? So I'll take that object, just kind of nudge it over a bit. You can also go in here to UVs and just go to automatic is also really great for square objects. And if you go to UV editor, it's like super awesome, very clean. I might just take all the shells and rotate them because I do want this facing the right way if I'm having brick patterns. I want to rotate. Yeah, where's my rotate? Rotate 90 degrees. And then just fit that in. And hit go Z back. So again, if I throw on some noise, I'll go to alpha. I'll pick a different alpha this time. I had some other one here. Painted plaster. I usually pick the displacement. Again, I'll take the alpha scale, the strength, so I can see it. I'm going to really exaggerate it and then take the mix. Yeah, that's just noise. So 0 is going to be alpha scale, and then take the alpha scale down, take the strength down a bit. Okay, pretty cool. Say okay. Now I mentioned this, people do this all the time. They make this mistake. They'll say apply to mesh, right? There's no resolution to support that detail. And right now what this is almost like a rendered texture preview. It's not showing you what the mesh is actually going to look like. So method one is you just hit Control D, which divides the mesh up, and you'll see my poly count go up in the upper left corner here. And then I'll say apply to mesh. But even then, sometimes you hit apply and it's still kind of blocky. I have a little cheat for this. Something under geometry. Go to geometry and say convert BPR to geo. This will literally apply the mesh to whatever resolution it needs to maintain that level of detail. So right now it's made it a 7 million poly mesh. So now I've got all the detail I want right there. Okay. Oh, I think I made a mistake. Let me undo because I forgot to turn on my little switch under edit to UV. There we go. Which will affect the sort of scaling. So that's where I'll probably need to alpha scale back down a bit. And maybe adjust my strength a bit as well. Okay, there we go. So again, I'll go to, again, you can just divide until it's high enough, or I usually get lazy and just go convert BPR to geo. Yeah. And then, as I said, you can kind of go in and do some damage with trim dynamics. So you can kind of like chip away at some corners, right? You can also come through, like I said, with more damage brushes. So it's, I don't know, it's a little bit of knowledge to get going, but once you get going, it's a lot of fun. Right, so we can throw in different types of damage, and I always experiment too with size. Intensity is another one I think is very, very useful to vary, because sometimes like less is more, right? I find oftentimes less is more. Yeah, I'll grab some other damage here. So right, the environment's starting to come together, come alive. Okay.